Hello viewers and welcome to another chapter of reading. So let's get started, shall we? Chapter 3. Will and Won't. Harry Potter was snoring wildly. My grandma definitely snores. Let's see if I can imitate that. I tried. I don't actually snore, by the way. More of a relaxed breather. If you're comfortable sharing, do you snore too? Anyway, he had been sitting in a chair beside his bedroom window for the best part of 4 hours, staring out at the darkening street, and had finally fallen asleep with one side of his face pressed against the cold window pane, his glasses askew, and his mouth wide open. The misty fall. What? Oh. Okay. I just never came across that word before. The misty fog. Yes, this is a word. I searched up the meaning for you. His breath left on the window sparkled in the orange glare of the street lamp outside, and the artificial light drained his face of all color, so that he looked ghostly beneath his shock of untidy black hair. The room was strewn with various possessions and a good smattering of rubbish. Owl feathers, apple cores, sweet wrappers littered the floor. A number of spell books lay higgledy-piggledy among the tangled ropes on his bed, and a mess of newspapers sat in a pile of white on his desk. The headline of one blared, "Harry Potter, the Chosen One?" Rumors continued to fly about the mysterious recent disturbance at the Ministry of Magic, during which he who must not be named was sighted once more. "We're not allowed to talk about it." "Don't ask me anything," said one agitated obliviator, who refused to give his name as he left the ministry last night. Nevertheless, highly placed sources within the ministry have confirmed that the disturbance centered on the fabled Hall of Prophecy. Though ministry spokespersons have hitherto refused even to confirm the existence of such a place, a growing number of the wizarding community believe that the Death Eaters now are serving sentences in Azkaban for trespass and attempted theft or attempting to steal a prophecy. The nature of the prophecy is unknown, although speculation is rife that it concerns Harry Potter, the only person ever known to have survived the killing curse, and who is also known to have been at the ministry on the night in question. Some are going so far as to call Potter the Chosen One, believing that the prophecy names him as the only one who will be able to rid us of he who must be named. Foreshadowing. The whereabouts of the prophecy, if it exists, are unknown, although, continued, page 2, column 5, a second newspaper lay beside the first. This one bore the headline, "Scriptor Succeeds Fudge." Most of this front page was taken up by a large and black and white picture of a man with a lion-like mane of thick hair. I have thick hair. And a rather ravaged face. But I do not, as you can tell, have a ravaged face. Thank goodness. The picture was moving. The man was waving at the ceiling. Okay. I'm waving at the ceiling of the room. You're welcome. Rufus Grimjaw, previously head of the Orr office in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, has succeeded Cornelius Fudge as Minister of Magic. The appointment has largely been greeted with enthusiasm by the wizarding community, although rumors of a rift between the new minister and Albus Dumbledore, newly reinstated chief warlock of the Wizarding God, surfaced within hours of Scrimgeour taking office. Scrimgeour's representatives admitted that he had met with Dumbledore at once upon taking possession of Top, but refused to comment on the topics under discussion. Albus Dumbledore is known to continued page 3, column 2. To the left of this paper sat another, which had been folded so that a story bearing the title, Ministry Guarantees Students' Safety, was visible. Newly appointed Minister of Magic Rufus Grimjaw spoke today of the tough new measures taken by his ministry to ensure the safety of students returning to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry this autumn. For obvious reasons, the ministry will not be going into detail about its stringent new security plans, said the minister, although an insider confirmed that measures include defensive spells and charms, a complex array of counter curses, and a small task force of aurors dedicated solely to the protection of Hogwarts School. Most seemed reassured by the new minister's tough stand on student safety, said Mrs. Augusta Longbottom. My grandson Neville, a good friend of Harry Potter's incidentally, who fought the Death Eaters alongside him at the ministry in June, and... But the rest of the story was obscured by the large bird cage standing on top of it. Inside was a magnificent snowy owl. Her amber eyes surveyed the room incuriously, her head swiveling occasionally to gaze at her snoring master. Once or twice she clicked her beak impatiently, but Harry was too deeply asleep to hear her. I'm a heavy sleeper too, Harry. A large trunk stood in the very middle of the room. Its lid was open. It looked expectant, yet it was almost empty but for a residue of old underwear, sweets, empty ink bottles, and broken quills that coated the very bottom. Nearby on the floor lay a purple leaflet emblazoned with the words, "Issued on behalf of the Ministry of Magic, protecting your home and family against dark forces." The wizarding community is currently under threat from an organization calling itself the Death Eaters. Observe the following simple security guidelines will help protect you, your family, and your home from attack. I'm going to label this foreshadowing because... foreshadowing. I don't want to give out spoilers, so I'm calling it foreshadowing for foreshadowing's sake. Just bear with me, guys, please. I trust I will explain once the chapter is read. You are advised not to leave the house alone. Good to know. Particular care should be taken during the hours of darkness. Wherever possible, arrange to complete journeys before night has fallen. Good to know that too. Review the security arrangements around your house, making sure that all family members are aware of emergency measures such as sealed and disillusionment charms, and in case of underage family members, silent on apparition. Agree on security questions with close friends and family, so as to detect Death Eaters masquerading as others by use of the Polyjuice potion. See page 2. Foreshadowing for more foreshadowing's sake. Should you feel that a family member, colleague, friend, or neighbor is acting in a strange manner, contact the magical law enforcement squad at once. They may have been put under the Imperious Curse. See page 4. Should the dog mark appear over any dwelling place or other building, do not enter, but contact the OR office immediately. Unconfirmed sightings suggest that the Death Eaters may now be using infrared. Foreshadowing, for foreshadowing's sake, again. See page 10. Any sighting of an infraris or encounter with the same should be reported to the Ministry immediately. Harry grunted in his sleep and his face slid down the window an inch or so, making his glasses still more lopsided. But he did not wake up. An alarm clock, repaired by Harry several years ago, ticked widely on the still, showing 1 minute to 11. Oh, Harry, I do not like alarm clocks either, but to fix one, I admire your courage. Beside it, held in place by Harry's relaxed hand, was a piece of parchment covered in thin, slanting writing, known to us as italics. Harry had read this letter so often since its arrival 3 days ago, that although it had been delivered in a tightly furled scroll, it now lay quite flat. Dear Harry, if it is convenient to you, I shall call at number 4 Pivot Drive this coming Friday at 11 p.m. to escort you to the Burrow, where you have been invited to spend the remainder of your school holidays. If you are agreeable, I should also be glad of your assistance in a matter to which I hope to attend on the way to a Burrow. I shall explain this more fully when I see you. Kindly send your answer by return of the cell. Hoping to see you this Friday, I am, yours most sincerely, Albus Dumbledore. Though he already knew it by heart, Harry had been stealing glances at this missive every few minutes since 7 o'clock that evening, when he had first taken up his position beside his bedroom window, which had a reasonable view of both ends of Pivot Drive. He knew that his point was to keep rereading Dumbledore's words. Harry sent back his yes with the delivery now, as requested, but now all he could do was wait. Either Dumbledore was going to come, or he wasn't. But Harry hadn't packed. It just seemed too good to be true that he was going to be rescued from the Dursleys after a mere fortnight of their company. Yep, you know where this is headed. And for a fortnight there we were. He could not shrug off the feeling that something was going to go wrong. His reply to Dumbledore's letter might have gone astray. Dumbledore could be prevented from collecting him. The letter might not turn out to be from Dumbledore at all, but a trick, joke, or trap. Harry had not been able to face packing and then being let down and having to unpack again. The only gesture he had made to the possibility of a journey was to shut his snowy owl Hedwig safely in her cage. The minute hand on the alarm clock reached number 12, and at that precise moment, the street lamp outside the window went out. Harry awoke as though the sudden darkness were an alarm. Hastily straightening his glasses and unsticking his cheek from the glass, he pressed his nose against the window instead, and squinted down at the pavement. A tall figure in a long billowing cloak was walking up the garden path. Harry jumped as though he had received an electric shock. knocked over his chair, and started snatching anything and everything within reach from the floor and throwing it into the trunk. Even as he lobbed a set of robes, 2 spellbooks, and a packet of crisps across the room, the doorbell rang. What flavor, Harry? Sour cream and onion? Cheddar cheese? Ranch? Do they even have ranch chips? Do they even have ranch chips in there? Who knows? Point is, I need to know what flavor, Harry. As for the doorbell ringing, beep beep, ding dong. Anyway, downstairs in the living room, his Uncle Vernon shouted, "Who in blazes is calling at this time of night?" Harry rose with a brass telescope in one hand and a pair of trainers in the other. He had completely forgotten to warn the Dursleys that Dumbledore might be coming. Oh, Harry, we love you anyway. Feeling both panicky and close to laughter, he clambered over the trunk and rushed open his bedroom door in time to hear a deep voice say, "Good evening. You must be Mr. Dursley. I dare say Harry has told you I've been coming for him." Harry ran down the stairs 2 at a time, coming to an abrupt halt several steps from the bottom, as long experience had taught him to remain out of arm's reach of his uncle whenever possible. Good strategy, Harry. There in the doorway stood a tall, thin man with waist-length silver hair and beard. Half-moon spectacles were perched on his crooked nose, and he was wearing a long black traveling cloak and a pointed hat. Vernon Dursley, whose mustache was quite as bushy as Dumbledore's, though black, and who was wearing a puce dressing gown, was staring at the visitor as though he could not believe his tiny eyes. "Judging by your look of stunned disbelief, Harry did not warn you that I was coming," said Dumbledore pleasantly. "However, let us assume that you have invited me warmly into your house. It is unwise to linger over on doorsteps in these troubled times." He stepped smartly over the threshold and closed the front door behind him. It is a long time since my last visit," said Dumbledore, peering down his crooked nose at Uncle Vernon. "I must say, your acapendis. Did I pronounce that right? I don't even know. Oh, okay. So it's a type of flower, and apparently this is how you pronounce it.
Agapanthus.
Good to know. Well, whatever they said are floating. Vernon Dursley said nothing at all. He did not doubt that speech would return to him, and soon. The vein pulsing in his uncle's temple was reaching danger point, but something about Dumbledore seemed to have robbed him temporarily of breath. It might have been the blatant wizardness of his appearance, but it might too have been that even Uncle Vernon could sense that here was a man with whom it would be very difficult to bully. Yeah, I'm agreeing with that. Good evening, Harry, said Dumbledore, looking up at him through his half-moon glasses with the most satisfied expression. Excellent, excellent. These words seemed to rouse Uncle Vernon. It was clear that as far as he was concerned, any man who could look at Harry and say excellent, was a man with whom he could never see eye to eye. "I don't mean to be rude," he began in a tone that threatened rudeness in every syllable. "Yet sadly accidental rudeness occurs most alarmingly often." Dumbledore finished the sentence gravely. "Best to say nothing at all, my dear man. Ah, and this must be Petunia." The kitchen door had opened, and there stood Harry's aunt, wearing rubber gloves and a housecoat over her nightdress. Cruelly halfway through her usual bedtime wipe down of all the kitchen surfaces, her rather horsey face registered nothing but shock. "Albus Dumbledore," said Dumbledore when Uncle Vernon failed to effect an introduction. "We have corresponded, of course." Foreshadowing of a flashback. I guess. Is that what I'm looking for? Well, whether that is what I'm looking for or not, bear with me. Harry thought this was an odd way of reminding Aunt Petunia that he had once sent her an exploding letter. But Aunt Petunia did not challenge the term. "And this must be your son Dudley." Dudley had at that moment peered out round the living room door. His large blond head, rising out of the stripy collar of his pajamas, looked oddly disembodied, his mouth gaping in astonishment and fear. Dumbledore waited a moment or two, apparently to see whether any of the Dursleys were going to say anything. But as the sequence stretched on, he smiled. "Shall we assume that you have invited me into your sitting room?" Dudley scrambled out of the way as Dumbledore passed him. Harry, still clutching the telescope and trainers, jumped the last few stairs and followed Dumbledore, who had settled himself in the armchair nearest the fire and was taking in the surroundings with an expression of benign interest. He looked quite extraordinarily out of place. Would have loved to see that in the films, honestly. "Won't we leaving, sir?" Harry asked anxiously. "Yes, indeed we are. But there are a few matters we need to discuss first," said Dumbledore, "and I would prefer not to do so in the open. We shall trespass upon your aunt and uncle's hospitality only a little longer." "You will you?" Vernon Dursley had entered the room, Petunia at his shoulder, and Dudley sulking behind them both. "Yes," said Dumbledore simply, "I shall." He drew his wand so rapidly that Harry barely saw it. With a casual flick, the sofa zoomed forward and knocked the knees out from under all three Dursleys so that they collapsed upon it in a heap. Another flick of the wand and the sofa zoomed back to its original position. "You may as well be comfortable," said Dumbledore pleasantly. As he replaced his wand in his pocket, Harry saw that his hand was blackened and shriveled. It looked as though his flesh had been burned away. "So, what happened to your—" "Later, Harry," said Dumbledore. "Please sit down." Harry took the remaining armchair, choosing not to look at the Dursleys, who seemed stunned into silence. "I would assume that you were going to offer me refreshment," Dumbledore said to Uncle Vernon, "but the evidence so far suggests that would be optimistic to the point of foolishness." A third twitch of the wand, and a dusty bottle and 5 glasses appeared in midair. The bottle tipped and poured a generous measure of honey-colored liquid into each of the glasses, which then floated to each person in the room. "Madame Rosmerta's finest oak-matured mead," said Dumbledore, raising his glass to Harry. who caught a hold of his own and sipped. He had never tasted anything like it before, but enjoyed it immensely. That does sound good now that I think about it. Can we find a recipe, please? The Dursleys, after quick, scared looks at one another, tried to ignore their glasses completely. A difficult feat, as they were nudging them gently on the sides of their heads. Harry could not suppress a suspicion that Dumbledore was rather enjoying himself. I mean, I would too, let's be real. We all would. Well, Harry, said Dumbledore, turning toward him, a difficulty has arisen which I hope you will be able to solve for us. By us, I mean the Order of the Phoenix. But first of all, I must tell you that Sirius's will was discovered a week ago, and that he left you everything he owned. Over on the sofa, Uncle Vernon's head turned, but Harry did not look at him, nor could he think of anything to say except, "Oh, right." Oh, wrong voice. "Oh, right. This is, in the main, very straightforward," Dumbledore went on. "You will add a reasonable amount of gold to your account at Gringotts, and you inherit all of Sirius's personal possessions. The slightly problematic part of the legacy—" "His godfather's dead," said Uncle Vernon wildly from the sofa. Dumbledore and Harry both turned to look at him. The glass of meat was now mucking quite insistently on the side of Vernon's head. He attempted to beat it away. "He's dead, his godfather." "Yes," said Dumbledore. He did not ask why Harry had not confided in the Dursleys. You try to figure that out, Dumbledore. It's pretty simple." "Our problem," he continued to Harry, as if there had been no interruption, "is that Sirius also left you number 12 Vermont Place." "He's been left a house?" said Uncle Vernon greedily, his small eyes narrowing, but nobody answered him. "You can keep using it as headquarters," said Harry. "I don't care. You can have it. I really don't want it." Harry never wanted to set foot in number 12 Vermont Place again if he could help it. Oh, Harry. I can understand why, but at the same time, this is complete irony. Advanced Potterheads, you know why. New Potterheads, you're just gonna have to wait. He thought he would be haunted forever by the memory of Sirius prowling in its dark, musty rooms alone, imprisoned with the place he had wanted so desperately to leave. "That is generous," said Dumbledore. "We have, however, vacated the building temporarily." "Why?" "Well," said Dumbledore, ignoring the mutterings of Uncle Vernon, who was now being rapped smartly over the head by the persisting glass of mead, "Black family tradition decreed that the house was handed down to the direct line, to the next male with the name of Black. Sirius was the very last of the line, as his younger brother, Regulus, predeceased him, and both were childless. While his will makes it perfectly plain that he wants you to have the house, it is nevertheless possible that some spell or enchantment has been set upon the place to ensure that it cannot be owned by anyone other than a pureblood." A vivid image of the shrieking, spitting portrait of Sirius's mother that hung in the hall of number 12, Grimmauld Place, flashed into Harry's mind. "I bet there has," he said. "Quite," said Dumbledore. "And if such an enchantment exists, then the ownership of the house is most likely to pass to the eldest of Sirius's living relatives, which would mean his cousin Bellatrix Lestrange." Without realizing what he was doing, Harry sprang to his feet. The telescope and trainers in his lap rolled across the floor. "Oh, I hope that telescope's alright." Bellatrix Lestrange, Sirius's killer, inherit his house? No, he said. Well, obviously, we would prefer that she didn't get it either, said Dumbledore calmly. The situation is fraught with complications. We do not know whether the enchantments we ourselves had placed upon it, for example, making it unplottable, will now hold that the ownership has passed from Sirius's hands. It might be that Bellatrix will arrive on the doorstep at any moment. Naturally, we had to move out until such time as we have clarified the position. But how are you going to find out if I'm allowed to own it? Fortunately, said Dumbledore, there is a simple test. He placed his empty glass on a small table beside his chair, but before he could do anything else, Uncle Vernon shouted, "Will you get these rotty things off us?" Harry looked around. All three of the Dursleys were cowering with their arms over their heads as their glasses bounced up and down on their skulls, their contents flying everywhere. I would have loved seeing that in the films. Oh, I'm so sorry, said Dumbledore politely, and he raised his wand again. All three glasses vanished. But it would have been better manners to drink it, you know. It would have been, yes, but the Dursleys, well, I don't think manners is in their vocabulary, unfortunately. It looked as though Uncle Vernon was bursting with any number of unpleasant retorts, but he merely shrank back into the cushion with Aunt Petunia and Dudley, then said nothing, keeping his small piggy eyes on Dumbledore's wand. You see, said Dumbledore, turning back to Harry and again speaking as though Uncle Vernon had not uttered, if you had indeed inherited the house, you have also inherited... He flicked his wand for a fifth time. There was a loud crack, and a house elf appeared, with a snout for a nose, giant bat's ears, and enormous bloodshot eyes, crouching on the Dursleys' shag carpet and covered in grimy rags. Aunt Petunia let out a hair-raising shriek, which I will not attempt, even though I'm outside. Nothing this filth they had entered her house in living memory. Dudley drew his large, bare, pink feet off the floor and sat with them almost raised above his head, as though he thought the creature might run off his pajama trousers. And Uncle Vernon bellowed, "What is that?" "Creature," finished Dumbledore. "Creature won't! Creature won't! Creature won't!" croaked the house elf quite as wildly as Uncle Vernon, stamping his long-gnarled feet and pulling his ears. "Creature belongs to Miss Bellatrix, oh yes. Creature belongs to the Blacks. Creature's want his new mistress. Creature won't go to the Potter's. Creature won't. As you can see, Harry, said Dumbledore wildly over Creature's continued croaks of won't. Creature is showing a certain reluctance to pass on into your ownership. I don't care, said Harry again, looking with disgust at the writhing, stamping house. I don't want him. Oh, Harry. Hermione would not be too happy with you right now. Won't. You would prefer him to pass into the ownership of Bellatrix Lestrange, bearing in mind that he has lived at the headquarters of the Order of Phoenix for the past year. Won't. Harry stared at Dumbledore. He knew that Creature could not be permitted to go with Bellatrix Lestrange, but the idea of owning him, of having responsibility for the creature that had betrayed Sirius, repugnant. Give him an order, said Dumbledore. If he has passed your ownership, he will have to obey. If not, then we shall have to think of some other means of keeping him from his rightful mistress. Won't, 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 won't. Creature's voice had risen to a scream. Harry could think of nothing to say except, Creature, shut up! It looked for a moment as though Creature was going to choke. He grabbed his throat, his mouth still working furiously, his eyes bulging. After a few seconds of frantic gulping, he threw himself face forward onto the carpet, Aunt Petunia whimpered, and beat the floor with his hands and feet, giving himself over to a violent but entirely silent tantrum. Again, I say Hermione would be rather disappointed in you right now, Harry. Well, that simplifies matters, said Dumbledore cheerfully. It seems that serious knew what he was doing. You are the rightful owner of number 12 Grimmauld Place and of Creature. Do I have to keep him with me? Harry asked aghast as Creature thrashed around at his feet. Not if you don't want to, said Dumbledore. If I might make a suggestion, you could send him to Hogwarts to work in the kitchen there. That way the other house elves could keep an eye on him. Yeah, said Harry. Yeah, I'll do that. Creature, I want you to go to Hogwarts and work in the kitchens there with the other house elves. Creature, who was now lying flat on his back with his arms and legs in the air, gave Harry one upside-down look of deepest loathing, and with another loud crack, vanished. Good, said Dumbledore. There's also the matter of the hippogriff Buckbeak. Hagrid has been looking after him since Sirius died, but Buckbeak is yours now, so if you would prefer to make different arrangements... No, said Harry at once. He can stay with Hagrid. I think Buckbeak would prefer that. Hagrid will be delighted, said Dumbledore, smiling. He was thrilled to see Buckbeak again. Incidentally, we have decided, in the interest of Buckbeak's safety, to rechristen him Witherwings for the time being. Though I doubt the Ministry would ever guess he is the hippogriff they once sentenced to death. Now, Harry, is your trunk packed? Doubtful that I would turn up, Dumbledore suggested shrewdly. I'll just go and, finish off, said Harry hastily, hurrying to pick up his fallen telescope and trainers. It took him a little over 10 minutes to track down everything he needed. At last he had managed to extract his invisibility cloak from under the bed, screwed the top back on his jar of color change ink. Ooh, that sounds pretty. And forced the lid of his trunk shut on his cauldron. Then, heaving his trunk in one hand and holding Hedwig's cage in the other, he made his way back downstairs. He was disappointed to discover that Dumbledore was not waiting in the hall, which meant that he had to return to the living room. Nobody was talking. Dumbledore was humming quietly, apparently quite at his ease, but the atmosphere was thicker than cold custard. And Harry didn't dare look at the Dursleys as he said, Professor, I'm ready now. Good, said Dumbledore. Just one last thing then. And he turned to speak to Dursley once more. As you know, will no doubt be aware, Harry comes of age in a year's time. No, said Aunt Petunia, speaking for the first time since Dumbledore's arrival. I'm sorry, said Dumbledore politely. No, he doesn't. He's a month younger than Dudley, and Dudley doesn't turn 18 until the year after next. Ah, said Dumbledore presently. But in the wizarding world, we come of age at 17. Uncle Vernon murmured, Preposterous! But Dumbledore ignored him. Now, as you already know, the wizard called Lord Voldemort has returned to this country. The wizarding community is currently in a state of open warfare. Harry, whom Lord Voldemort has already attempted to kill on a number of occasions, is even in greater danger now than the day I left him upon your doorstep 15 years ago, with a letter explaining about his parents' murder and expressing the hope that you would care for him as though he were your own. Dumbledore paused, and although his voice remained light and calm, he gave no obvious sign of anger. Harry felt a kind of chill emanating. Just go with either of those pronunciations at this point, please. From him, and noticed that the Dursleys drew very slightly closer together. You did not do as I asked. You've never treated Harry as a son. He has known nothing but neglect and often cruelty at your hands. The best that can be said is that he has at least escaped the appalling damage you have inflicted upon the unfortunate boy sitting between you. Both Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon looked around instinctively, as though expecting to see someone other than Dudley squeezed between them. "Oh, Miss Tree, Doddles, would you?" began Uncle Vernon fiercely. But Dumbledore raised his finger for silence, a silence which fell as though he had struck Uncle Vernon dumb. The magic I invoked 15 years ago means that Harry has the powerful protection while he can still call this house home. However miserable he has been here, however unwelcome, however badly treated, you have at least grudgingly allowed him house through. This magic will cease to operate the moment that Harry turns 17. In other words, at the moment he becomes a man. I ask only this, that you allow Harry to return once more to this house before his 17th birthday, which we will ensure that the protection continues until that time. None of the Dursleys said anything. Dudley was frowning slightly, as though he was still trying to work out when he had ever been mistreated. I sure hope you have some conclusions, Dudley. Uncle Vernon looked as though he had something stuck in his throat. Aunt Petunia, however, was oddly flushed. "Well, Harry, time for us to be off," said Dumbledore at last, standing up and straightening his long black cloak. "Until we meet again," he said to the Dursleys, who looked as though that moment could wait forever as far as they were concerned. And after doffing his hat, he swept from the room. "Bye," said Harry hastily to the Dursleys, and followed Dumbledore, who paused beside Harry's trunk, upon which Hedwig's cage was perched. "We do not want to be encumbered by these just now," he said, pulling out his wand again. "I shall send them to the Burrow to await us there. However, I would like you to bring your invisibility cloak, just in case." Harry extracted his cloak from his trunk with some difficulty, trying not to show Dumbledore the mess within. When he had stuffed it into an inside pocket of his jacket, that's some cloak to fit in a jacket pocket, Dumbledore waved his wand in the trunk cage, and Hedwig vanished. Dumbledore then waved his wand again, and the front door opened into cool, misty darkness. "And now, Harry, let us step out into the night and pursue that flighty, tempestuous adventure." And that is the end of this chapter. Join me next week for Chapter 4, Horace Slughorn. And there's a surprise for next week as well. But until then, bye!